we go.
Hey.
Hey, welcome everybody coming on to our Zoom session today. All right, see people coming in. Go ahead and put your hello into the chat. Let us know where you're from, calling in today, connecting in from all over the world. Look at that, Andrew Yavalo has already put a question in. Somebody was prepared. Looks like we're going live on Facebook as well now. So if you're tuning in already on the Facebook Live, welcome again. Welcome to our Resonance Academy Faculty Q&A, woohoo! Which we do every month on the third Wednesday of each month. And this is a chance for you guys to hang out with us guys and girls here at Resonance Academy, our faculty, and to post your questions and for us to get a chance to reflect on the unified science, the unified physics, and all things related to that, and then even things beyond that. Although there's nothing beyond it. It all is related to the one whole thing. So let's just be clear about that. So yeah, as some of you are doing here on Zoom, if you're part of our academy and our membership, you're here on Zoom with us, and you can post your questions as you're doing in the Q&A panel, and that's found at the bottom of your screen, a little Q&A button down there. And if you could just post one, maybe two questions at most, that would be great. We always get more than we can ever get to. Then you can also upvote questions so we can see which ones are of most interest to everybody. And we'll do some of those upvoted ones, and I think I may also kind of just we actually, all of us could random access some questions as well. And we might even want to start that way. We only have Ines for an hour, I think Alan Green for a short amount of time, Adam for an hour roughly or so, and I think William and Jamie and I are here for the whole thing. So, and then, yeah, put your comments in the chat. Remember in the chat to change over to panelists and attendees. Some of you are putting your chat in only to us panelists, and you don't realize it. But there's an option down there that you can select to change to panelists and attendees, and that way everybody will see your chat posts. Right now, there's a bunch of you, and only the small group of us panelists are seeing your chats, which is fine, but you might want to share it with everybody. So make sure you do that. And welcome everybody and the faculty here. I know we have a short amount of time, so we can maybe just do like a little 2-minute quick hit on what's happening for each of us as a quick share, maybe 2 to 3 minutes, so that we can not take too long for our little check-ins, and then we can get to some questions while you guys are still available here. So let's do a quick little round robin on that. Jamie, how about you? What's doing cooking for you?
I will just say thank you to the global community out there for supporting us in 2020, but that was quite a ride. And I'm really glad that we are now in a new phase in the grand scheme of things in resonance science and in the United States of America, which is where resonance science is based. I'm very hyper aware of the fact that our work has to do with the entire universe, not just one planet or one country on this planet, but, or I should say, as Nassim would remind us, the shift is real, and I can feel that pendulum swinging in the big arc of science, because the latest discoveries that have been coming out that I've been posting to social media and that people in this chat have been putting into WhatsApp chats, the discoveries in science are going off the chart right now, as is the change in social worlds, media, online and offline, and in governments, obviously. So it's a good time for us to just now seriously buckle down and fire all cylinders. That's what I'm preparing to do now, is literally going, set the gear shift to the high gear of your soul, as a musical hero of mine once said. So that's my message for today. Thank you guys, love you.
That's awesome, Jamie, thank you. Right on, that's so true. Great, Adam, how about you?
Thanks, Marshall. Yeah, wow, what a start to 2021. Boy, talk about kicking in the afterburners and getting some things going. I am really happy to be here, and as always, super excited to connect with you, the amazing Resonance Academy community, and the world at large on my favorite topic in the universe, and unified physics, which is really just such an exquisite thing to explore, is getting to know who we are and what we're here to do. And I think that, you know, as we round this corner and come into this new year together, I really encourage all of us to do the deeper work, you know, explore ourselves, get in, deep dive, you know, pick apart all of the massive and web of information and dive deeper into the place where you feel the deepest resonance of truth in yourself. And we can really clean up the noosphere together, as Teilhard de Chardin would say, if we're willing to really get down to the depths and access the place where we know the absolute through our own being, you know, and not just rely on all of the noise, because there's a lot of noise out there right now, and a lot of it is far from the truth. And there's other things where you can feel and you can see that resonance in people and being shared by others that you know as the deepest truth, because it's resonating with what's at the core of you, that goodness, that love, that honor. So let's make 2021 a year of honor and respect and goodness and truth and love and acceptance, right? Let's do it.
I'm with you all the way on that, brother. That is great. Well said. It is time. Yeah. We have all the capacities we need to actually steer that in that direction and bring this through as we envision it. Thank you, Adam. Alan, welcome again. Good to have you here. What's cooking for you?
Hey, everybody. It's lovely to be on. Yeah, I second everything that's been said so far. Obviously, Jamie, we are taking it up a notch. Please go up to 11. I just did my 11th podcast, which I do every other Sunday, and so number 11 turned out to be one where I featured that little clip from Spinal Tap of, you know, we all love, and it's funny how the mathematics always seems to tie in with that as well, because tons of stuff is. For me, I'm excited about, I'm going to be finally launching for Resonance a course on Shakespeare equations. And for those of you who don't know really what that entails, the first course will be just a basic primer on, well, what did this author or authors leave to us that is of interest to us? Why should we be interested, except for the fact that we all know that he or whoever it was the greatest writer of all time. You know, Bartlett's Quotations has 85 pages of Shakespeare quotes and 47 pages of Bible quotes. That tells you something. That this person wrote stuff that resonated to the hearts and minds of, you know, more than even the Bible references do. And yet, the winner of the most influential book of all time is always the King James Bible, right? Always. That's the most influential book, they say. It's not a coincidence that there is a suspicious likeness between the works of Shakespeare that cover the whole gamut, whether it's, you know, the spiritual allegory of The Tempest, or political warnings of Richard III and King Lear, or the fantasy-laced musings of A Midsummer Night's Dream, or the flat-out joy and slapstick comedy of Twelfth Night, are all sprinkled with fairy dust of the human divine play. And he nails it. utterly nails it, and that's why the world quotes so often, oh, Shakespeare got it here and here, here. Now, for me, that's culminating now in 17 years of research. I'm so excited to be bringing to you all, because it's not just Shakespeare. It turns out that this being or group of beings were on a mission to deliver mathoetics, I call it. We already know the poetics of it, but there's mathoetics. There's utter precise geometry and mathematics in the sonnets cover, pointing us to the Great Pyramid. But beyond that, it's going to a unifying message of the whole thing. It is far, far more than this is just some great writer who had a particular knack for a turn of phrase. This is a spiritual scripture, but in a form that had not yet been devised at that time, 400 years ago. He was bringing it, or they were bringing it, in math as well as poetry. Can't prove a thing with poetry, right? You can just say it's beautiful, it means this to me, it means that to me. We all love it because it's got that amorphous, you know, ambiguity. Can't prove anything with poetry except that, wow, that moves me. But they decided to underpin it, every aspect of it, with utter pure math. And then they pointed us to the place where we can find the reason for that math, is the Great Pyramid and Solomon's Temple, within which is embedded just about all the allegorical myths of Rosicrucianism and Templars, Freemasons, all of that. Why? So I'm really excited to be bringing that to everybody, because it is a message of unity. It's not lost on me that the big question about the King James Bible is Psalm 46. People always bring that up. What's with Psalm 46? Why is the 46th word from the beginning shake, and the 46th word from the end is spear? You know, why is that? Is that some clue? Does it refer to maybe he had something to do with this? Well, it just hit me this morning watching the inauguration. This is not a political statement. It's just, we welcomed in the 46th president. And Psalm 46 has this incredible hint and clue. And the work that I'll be bringing to you after the basic course, is just the most exciting stuff I've ever been on in the whole 17 years I've been working on this. Because there is something in the King James Bible that utterly proves beyond any shadow of a doubt that Shakespeare, whoever that was certainly involved in the translation of it. And why would that be? And how? And not just, and again, so the message that is hidden in the coding of what's on the King James Bible and in sonnets, in Psalm 46 and its companion Psalm 54, they go together. 46 doesn't fit in a grid, 54 doesn't fit in a grid, but when you place them together, they lock into each other and they form a grid. And the message is right straight down the center. It's utterly impeccable, it's beautiful, and it's telling you about the mythical or real center of the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant, and what that really means in us. It's all mathematical from that point on. It's fabulous stuff. So I'm jazzed about it. I think we are on the cusp of something utterly enormous, and together we're going to be a part of waking up the planet, waking up ourselves, waking up the planet, and according to Jamie, to the rest of the universe. Yes, good. We have a part in that. Thank God. Thank Goddess. So I'm happy to be here and jazzed to be starting it at last. It's been over 2 years.
Yeah.
Let's have a course. So it's coming next week, or talking with David about it next week. Love you all. Ask questions.
Great.
Help each other.
Alan, I didn't realize you had Escher, the Escher strip just behind you. Beautiful. Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
you know,
yeah.
Escher was one of the most. I didn't know that part of him. He was really interested in the tilling, the surfaces, tilling objects one inside the other, and so
tiling.
The tiling.
Yes.
Tiling.
Sorry, absolutely. In fact, the very end of it here is a is a position on a chessboard. Right?
Yeah.
When you look at where the pieces are, you have to examine it sometime and go, okay, so who's going to win this game? And you can just see from the setup, he's set it up as a clue, and it's like, oh my God, yeah. But he's into that, into the whole.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a hidden message in everything, in the evolution of the
he's amazing.
The birds, bees,
styling,
coming back into the city.
Yeah, I love him. I use his drawings very much to explain that the tiling of the of shapes.
Well spotted, Inez. You win the spot prize, a signed book. Send me your address. No, I mean it. If you don't have one, send me your address. I'll send one to you and your husband, because you deserve it. You should have got one when we were at 1440, and I think I picked it. Yeah, it's all.
Well, Alan, thank you so much thank you for sharing that with your obvious, just deep enthusiasm coming from what you know is going to be presented, and I can feel like there's an emanation of the great insights that you've been able to glean from this deep study of a very esoteric aspect of mathematics, shall we say, that you know is obviously not. It's kind of a contradiction. Not obvious. It's not an obvious, to actually kind of start to see the pattern and decode that and bring it out to a sensible understanding is no small feat. And I'm so excited that you're going to be bringing this now to where our community and out beyond in the world can begin to understand what you know so deeply and you're so excited about.
No, it's my
coming soon.
Privilege to share it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Inez, why don't you go ahead and give us a little drop of what's going on for you?
Yeah, it's good that the noise, we have some music, Mexican music going on outside, so it stopped. So mariachi is singing. You would have heard it. Yeah.
I don't hear it, yeah.
Yeah, so well, I'm very excited starting this new year with everyone in the community. I'm in Module 7, still doing many work on that. It's amazing and it's incredible the amount of work it requires to put, because it's not just the works that have been done already by the foundation and by RSF and Nassim and in the team, but putting all the physics that's behind what has been published already is so much, and putting that into the very simple terms that we can all understand is such a challenge that I'm overwhelmed, but I'm learning so much. Because when you do that, that's when you understand what you don't understand. When you put things so very simple layman terms, it's like, okay, so this is, I thought this was clear for me, and so it seems it's not. So I'm learning a lot, and it's been beautiful. It's been a beautiful experience. I just hope to have it very soon. It's almost finished. I would say like in weeks, not months, weeks.
Nice.
In a week's period. So all that's between that and the work I've been doing with the Shintergy experiment, with this consciousness and mind interaction with the electromagnetic fields and all that. Also a lot of work on that side. So that's about the summary of what I've been up to this.
Wonderful. That's great. Again, another very exciting piece of what's coming for the Resonance Academy. We've been anticipating it for a while, but I know you're bringing as much clarity and coherence to being able to make it understandable. Yeah, it's no small challenge there either. So thank you so much for putting your dedicated attention and knowledge to that, because it's going to make a big difference for everybody. And really looking forward to that as well. Yeah, thank you, Inez.
You're welcome.
All right, William, how about a quick drop from you, and then we can get to some questions before some of our faculty has to leave.
Thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited about this new year. I think it's going to be a pivotal point with some of the new science we have that we're coming out with. I'm really looking forward to some of the possibilities. I have things in mind like consciousness interface technology, over unity energy production, gravitational control. You know, just like in the 20th century, when we gained capacity to utilize and work with the electromagnetic force, I think this century is going to be marked by obtaining that same kind of capability to work with and utilize the gravitational force. And, you know, Nassim has a new paper coming out where him and Dr. Olivier have found a scaling coefficient from the Planck scale to the universal scale that has this periodic fit for all organized matter in the universe. So, you know, with this, we can compute exact values defining the fundamental scaling factors of physical interactions. And this opens the way to the unification of all forces, all coupling constants in Nassim's holographic ratio. And so with this unification of forces, with this scaling ratio in a unified theoretical framework based on a fractalization of space-time, what I'm really excited to get working on is fitting in the biological system into that. Because, you know, you've got this periodic fit for all organized matter, and right in the middle of that scale, from the Planck to the universal scale, is the biological system. And so what we're really looking forward to is applying this amazing discoveries that they've made in the unified physics to the biophysics of the organism. So, you know, getting into some detailed descriptions of the dynamics occurring within the cell, within the mitochondria, the microtubules, the DNA, to explain things like consciousness. So I think this is the year where we're going to make some huge strides forward in those areas, and that's where my eyes are on the prize. That's certainly my goals for this year.
So,
you know.
You mean I'm not small?
Fantastic. You're huge, man.
I was told that I was really small compared to the size of the universe when I was a kid. So I always thought of myself as this little tiny thing. Now I realize I'm actually medium sized.
Yeah.
You're actually the Goldilocks. You're the Goldilocks size. You're the
It's a good place to be if you want to observe the whole thing. You know, you're halfway between big and small. You can check it all out.
That must
act as the communication channel between the ultra small and the ultra large.
That's right.
You're that communication channel.
Good work, universe. Good work, biology.
The interface.
What a coincidence.
I gotta say, that's exactly what John Dee was doing in the center of the Shakespeare things. He was literally saying he was communing with angels for years and had to keep it secret lest they burn him, you know, because we don't like that, do we? Oh, we must burn you for that. But he believed himself to be just literally that. I'm a conduit. I want to talk to angels to get the connection between man and the divine, and man and all. He was trying to unify all religions. That's a conduit. I got to just make a comment on what's on your board, your whiteboard, William. Obviously, it's something to do with maybe Lieb's constant. I don't know. We've got a lot of H's and O's. Doesn't it thrill you when you put it all up there and you just really realize it just says ho 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 ho? It's perfect.
Yes, it's a cosmic joke after all. It really is a cosmic joke, and we're all kind of slowly getting what the joke is. We're like, oh,
really seriously, blow up your window, look at William's whiteboard. Ho ho ho! It's great.
Well, you know, all those O's and H's make one of the most remarkable substances in the universe.
You sure do.
You know,
That's true.
And
Yes,
you know,
indeed.
it's got the most remarkable properties because of its geometry.
Yeah.
You know, not unlike, you know, the geometric messages that you discover in Shakespeare's work and everything. You know, it's got a hidden geometric message that you know is actually what gives it some of the most phenomenal properties of any substance in the universe.
Of course.
And we're talking about water, of course, in case that was anybody missed that.
Can you pin that down for us besides the hexagonal aspect? Because I think it's the hexagonal and pentagonal that you're talking about.
Well, you know, even a single molecule of H2O, you know, naively, you might think that you've got two protons, two hydrogens, and an oxygen. So the hydrogens would just bond to the oxygen and you'd have a nice linear molecule, right? But it doesn't do that. Actually, the way that the hydrogens bond, there's an empty electron valence orbital on the oxygen. And what that does is it actually causes it from go to like a linear molecule to a bent molecule. And it's about 104.7 degrees, this angle. And because of that geometric perturbation, going from linear to slightly actually asymmetric, it gives water what's called a partial dipole moment. And because of this, water is able to act as the universal solvent. It is one of the few substances, liquid substances in particular, that just about any ionic molecule, any ionic species can dissolve into its matrix. So it's the universal solvent. Now, this is critically important when you want to do biochemistry. If you wanted to do biochemistry, to have a metabolism and to have a cell and an organism, you need a universal solvent. And water fits the bill. And it's all because of that little bend. You know, if you think about other molecules that are linear, like say carbon dioxide or hydrocarbons in general, when they go into the liquid phase, they form amorphous oils. And they're not very good solvents at all, unless it's other non-polar substances. So, you know, water, because of that little characteristic of the molecule having that 105-degree angle, it's able to form structure, intramolecular structure in the matrix of the water. And it serves so that it can serve as a memory medium, an information exchange medium, a medium to allow for a diverse range of biochemistry.
William, did you just say, excuse me, I'm sorry, did you say the angle is 104.7?
I believe so, yeah, 104.7 degrees, maybe 104.3. Now, you know,
104.7197. You know, I mean, the reason I'm asking is because, you know, that struck a chord. I mean, that's to do with, you know, polar angle of cones. 1.047 is pi over 3. It's degrees 60 in radians. What on earth is the connection there? Because of course, that day that I was with you all, I mean, we were all there in Taurus Tech, and I had just introduced something about that. I'd said, oh, I found this thing that on Shakespeare's Sonnets cover that led me to Lieb's constant. Being the inverse of that radius.
104,5 or 45 to be exact. That's what I just found.
Oh, okay. So it's awfully close to what is the 1.047197, which is, you know, again, it's literally the pi over.
Is it like almost exactly divisible within pi?
Pi over 3.
That's amazing.
Well, the 1.04.
And then, so with Lieb's constant, one of the things is that the same mathematics that you would use to describe the crystallization of, say, water can be applied to the cubic-centered crystalline organization that Nassim and Olivier are describing for space-time.
Yeah, yeah.
I believe that's one of the things we were discussing when you were here with us.
Yeah, I mean, it goes into, well, tetrahedron shapes, doesn't it? When water freezes, it goes into a tetrahedron. And we're like, what? Oh my God, that's a huge thing. Has anybody seen the new Pyramid movie video in which this is introduced this stunning thing that I had not any idea about? I mean, I've been working on universal constant of measure, you know, foot to cubit to meter is in the Great Pyramid. I had launched that in 2016 at the CPAC conference because, again, it's on the cover of the Sonnets. And then also tied to Lieb's constant that day was the idea that, oh, it's sphere into cube and cube into sphere and sphere. I mean, on and on, it's right there. But in this movie, and I haven't done any research on it yet. Anybody know about this? A drop of water on any flat surface is 1 centimeter. You drop a drop of water onto a flat glass or any non-porous surface. It's a centimeter.
How big is the dropper? I mean, doesn't it depend how big the diameter of the dropper is?
No, apparently not. Now I can't confirm it, but check out the movie. While you're talking, I'll look it up on.
Throw a link in there, yeah.
And I'll put it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It's one of the most outstanding things of that movie. I don't know if it's real, but it makes intuitive sense. It just says no. You know, the utter foundation of the measurement systems,
gravity,
centimeter. It's you know, why does it? You know, is that real? If it is real, it is an astounding truth.
There's a maximum size that a water drop can be when it's falling. If it gets bigger, it splits in half. And so maybe that's the size that they're talking about. At the maximum size of a raindrop, for example. It needs enough time to fall. To
I don't know. No, it's not. The way they show it is just dropping it out of a dropper onto a glass surface or any flat, perfect, non-porous surface. And they say it is always measuring 1 centimeter in diameter. So it's not.
All right, we'll check that out. We'll check it out.
It's dependent on the dropper. It's dependent on water itself having that again.
Gravity, viscosity, all that.
Yeah. Big piece of news if it's real. Big.
Great.
Well, I can chain right off of that into a question if you want, Marshall, because
perfect. I was going to invite you and Ines while you guys are here to jump in on some questions you see that.
We'll send the Facebook hive mind.
Totally relevant.
Start Googling about the size of raindrops and put it in the comments. I'm following the chat on Zoom and the comments on Facebook at the same time. So
study and report back, team. From Dana Tomasino, she asks, I'm interested to know more about the research that Nassim mentions about water dictating the shape of DNA. Could William or someone explain more about this? And feel free to chime in on this, William, because you kind of led us into the water structure conversation. But where I want to take it actually is a little bit deeper, which relates to a topic that I brought into one of the previous faculty Q&As. And that is that through the study of the geometry of the proton that I lay out in explicit detail in the quantum geometry course within the Academy, when you look at what I call the vector vortices, the 12 radial lines where there are pentagonal intersections in the geodesic of the proton sphere, and you actually look at the stacking structure of those pentagonal vortices and the distancing and the measuring between them and how they move in structure, that structure itself matches the structure of DNA. So when we look at that from top down, it actually will look identical to DNA, a decagonal structure where you have, 2 turns, and each time you go down a layer in the geodesic, you're turning. And you could think of the bonds in the PSUs as actually chaining together in a sequence and forming this sort of DNA spiral. Now, it's not just a DNA with 2 poles, though. It's like a rotating field with 5 poles that are then rotating on each other. So it's a little more complex than our DNA. But I think that that just the inherency of the way that these pentagonal vortices structure in any geodesic, if that's going on at the space-time level, then just like, just like everything else, as above, so below, we see these patterns. We see the hexagonal pattern of PSU showing up in snowflakes. We see, that same pattern showing up in flowers. We see pentagons showing up in flowers. We see the phi ratio that's inherent in that showing up in galaxies. And so because we see these patterns at all levels, it's likely that actually space-time, through this mechanism that I believe is in the proton itself, is the sort of root or the smallest microcosmic patterning structure that then leads to those self-similar operations at fractal scales as we go up, including with water. So William, you can jump in on this part, because I'm curious, I've done a few studies with water, and there's a couple really great books about water out there, including one, The Fourth Phase of Water. I'm sure you know that one. And in some of these studies, they talk about how that little curve, that little bend of the molecule can let the water molecules chain together to form either rings together or form spirals. And it's my understanding that what the way they like to line up in that way in the studies that I've seen is in a pentagonal arrangement, right? Like they actually move along points of the pentagon, which would then suggest that this is following that same pattern as we're seeing in the proton and that we see in DNA.
Yeah. And as you were describing that, it almost made me wonder about how the DNA would match the geometric description you have if you had more than just the two strands. So if you had like 3 strands, 4 strands, 5 strands,
Right.
multiple stranded DNA, I wonder if it would match the geometry you were describing even more closely, because there's in some esoteric circles, there's this idea that multiple stranded DNA has kind of enhanced effects. Made me curious about that. But certainly, so because of that bend in the water molecule, it allows it to form this structural intermolecular geometry. And one of them is like a pentagonal spiral that is helical. And so actually, this is critical to the function of DNA in the cell, because water will form what's called a chiral superstructure around the DNA molecule. Nice. Linking those bends into tetrahedral coordinated units that form a helix around the DNA. And why this is so critical is that, for one, it actually holds the shape of the DNA. So the geometry at the biomolecular level is central to its functionality. This goes for proteins, RNA, DNA. The geometry is critically important in its function. So like if a protein doesn't fold correctly, it is non-functional, or it has an aberrant function that can be deleterious. And the geometry of many of these biomolecules, if not most all of them, is determined by their interaction with the water medium. And so when you're considering like DNA, not only is it dictating the geometry of the molecule, but as well, this chiral superstructure that it forms around the DNA molecule encodes information about what's inside the DNA molecule. This is, again, critically important because you have all these proteins that are going to bind to the double-stranded DNA and read it to find things like genes, open that double-stranded DNA up, and transcribe an RNA transcript to make a protein. Well, there's a problem though, because these proteins, they bind to the DNA and they run along the double helix scanning for genes. How do they know where a gene starts, or that there's even a gene within that double helix? The nucleotide sequences are hidden in a sense, because all it has is the backbone of the DNA. It turns out that the way that these polymerase enzymes read the DNA is via the water superstructure around the DNA. So as they're going along scanning, they're reading that chiral superstructure, and it's actually telling these polymerases what the DNA sequence is within the double helix. So they know where the gene is to open it up and start transcribing. It also functions to mediate electronic signaling, where you'll have like two proteins on the double helix, and they will send spin selective electrons along the DNA to read what's in there. And you know, this that has a name. It's called spintronics. We're trying to build computational devices that can do that. We haven't yet, you know, but your DNA is doing that constitutively all the time.
So just to translate that a little bit, because, you know, your languaging is epic, William, but I want our students to understand fully. So what it sounds like you're talking about, like water creating like a charge shell around the DNA. So like an encasement, that, because the DNA is in water, but we're talking about the molecular structure in the water kind of following around the braid of the helix. And that's creating kind of like a charge conductor that then whatever the charges in the DNA are then affecting the charge of the electrons in that water, right? And so then the protein can read what's going on inside the DNA structure through the different charges in the water, right? Exactly. And then also pulse electrons through the water. So you like electricity in the water that's then reading some of that inherent magnetic structure, kind of like we would maybe send an electron pulse through a solid state hard drive and notice what's turned on and what's turned off, right, in the gene sequencing, right? But that our bodies are doing that at a super advanced level with DNA.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, almost like the charge distribution of that shell of water around the DNA, the proteins are able to read that in the water to read what like the charge is inside, which corresponds to, you know, a specific nucleotide sequence.
Totally.
So I just want to interrupt. That was Adam simplifying William's explanation. I'd like to hear Jamie simplifying Adam's explanation. Because it'll probably be something like, you know, put electricity through water and shit happens. Something like that. I'm just probably, you know, is that what you'd say, Jamie?
We can't hear you, Jamie.
I would like to include something there because William mentioned it, chirality, which is really important at this stage, which basically means that the chirality means the property that you cannot superpose things on top of each other, no? So I say my hands are chiral because if I had them like that, they don't superpose exactly. So chirality is really important because it determines among many things the rotation of light, either to the right or to the left. So when William mentioned spintronics, what he's talking about is precisely that chirality and the spin of the electron are deeply connected. So it is a way that the system knows on how to choose between one side or the other in terms of the electron's spin. So it can interact with one part or the other depending on, so it's a crucial part of the information exchange in biology and in chemistry. It's precisely that, the chirality, the electron spin, and the light polarization, and they're all connected through this characteristics. I just wanted to.
There's also another kind of easy way to mentally translate that. So chirality can also be like the aggregate rotation around a spinning object. So like if you have an object spinning a certain direction, its chirality can be looked at as the way the entire object is also spinning or rotating, even while its particle or its point is spinning another direction. So like for example, the planets all rotate around the sun one way, even though they spin in different directions, right? There's a planet that actually rotates in the opposite direction. And so that can be looked at the chirality of planets, that they have this overall rotary direction while they're spinning in this direction. So that's just like, to bring it to the macrocosm, it helps me to translate it that way.
And thank you for elucidating for everyone the chirality, because just about every biomolecule in the body is chiral. And the reason for that is because it uses the spin polarization of light and the spin polarization of electrons for communication, for communication and for orchestrating and controlling biochemical processes.
Yeah, and that would probably be very linked to the fact that we have antimatter instead of matter, because I think there's a preference in direction. Like you can have the same molecule, but if it's chiral, one it's poisonous, and if you have the other version, it's benign. So the chirality aspect of a molecule, it's as important as that. So you can, and maybe I guess that at some point that would be also linked to the fact that there's matter and antimatter, but because matter and antimatter are also linked to the way, to the rotation, you know, so you have electron and anti-electron, which is basically the same characteristics except for their internal spin, let's say. So yeah, so that would be interesting to include in the model.
All of our
Yes, why don't you pick up on them? Well, I was going to invite NS to pick up on another question, but you can hear your last thought on this if you want, William. But then while you're still here, NS, I'd love to hear.
All of our DNA is left-handed. All of our proteins are right-handed. I wonder if antimatter beings, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Right-handed, all their proteins are left-handed.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Okay, so there's a question, Cheryl Banfield, yeah. And so she's asking about consciousness. I can just start the question, the answer, and then many of you, I'm sure, will pop in. So consciousness is a word that it's got a lot of layers and a lot of aspects to it. So you could have like the biological aspect of consciousness, which is something that William explains beautifully. You could have like the more physical aspect, which is something I am like more linked to, would be, what do we mean by consciousness, let's say at the physical level, no? At the physical level. So basically what the word I use, like that for me, it's more related to consciousness, would be feedback loop. The feedback loop, basically. That would be for me the process, because I like better to explain consciousness in terms of the process of exchange of information than as a state on itself. Like consciousness for me, it's like the process of this information exchange. So in this information exchange between the inside and the outside, which is basically what we have in a black hole, and it's basically what this model of the unification of scales has generalized, because we could start up from the first block, which is the PSU, which in itself, in this vacuum fluctuation, in this vorticial dynamic that the PSU has, there is an inherent feedback loop. So we could see this the same behavior that we see in black holes, white black holes, which is this double torus dynamics, which is a collective behavior of all these spins rotating. The same thing you would see in a chunk of it, or in a Planck. It's just this feed-forward mechanism, which is implicit even at the Planck scale. So with that in mind, then you could see that this is already like a proto-consciousness that is scaling up to the universal scale. And so as my consciousness is here at this moment in space and time, I know that in this consciousness, all scales are participating because they're all being part of this feedback loop. Because my being is not separate from any other scale. We're just all connected in a very intricate, but at the same time simple. And thanks to this scaling law that's about to come, we could all see that connection very clearly. So then this means that my consciousness involves consciousness of all scales, which are somehow manifesting at my scale through me, just as at or your scales through everyone. So, and so this, in this same question that Cheryl Banfield did, because in that I didn't read, I'll just read it for everyone to know. Could you please expound on the nature of consciousness in scientific but simple terms? How would you describe a human consciousness life cycle, pre-birth through after death, and how do dreams fit in? So you see in all these examples that Cheryl is giving, what we have here is an exchange between the inside and the outside. So for instance, when you talk about life and death, where you're saying, well, you could think for as an example, a pregnant woman, and you could say, okay, this pregnant woman, you could say the uterus is like the universe for this baby, you know? When the baby's born, then you could say for the uterus, it's like a death because it's no longer inside this universe. It just crossed the event horizon of the uterus to go into the life outside the uterus. So now it's disappeared on one side, but it has appeared on the other one, on the other side. So in this image, it's like if you had this cycle of life and death, it's just somehow passing from one event horizon to the other one. Just go from one side of the event horizon to the other one. And on each one, you're going to multiverses. So that's at least how I see it. And in that sense, life and death, or what was the other example she was dreams, it's the same. When you're awoke or awakened, and when you're dreaming, it's like in and out again. So it's somehow the same mechanism. So some people call the sleeping cycle like the death cycle as well, because you die when you're like in another realm, you're like dead when you're asleep, and then you awake, so you live again, and many things happen in between. And for the people that do this kind of very interesting energy work and dreams work and all that, and lucid dreams and all that, many things get solved, or you can work in between lives through your dreams, and they're basically a tool, a mechanism, an information exchange between this inside and the outside. So I would say, like in scientific terms, that would be my definition. My definition of consciousness would be the information exchange, the feedback loop between the inside and the outside of any system. And since we know everything is connected fractally, then that would forcefully imply connection with every other scale in the universe.
Beautifully said, and very, very clear, and it makes it evident how universal that function is, and the presence of what we call consciousness is ubiquitous in the entire system. And I love that relationship between the inner and outer realms, because there's always an event horizon in order to have existence. There has to be some surface, some membrane, something inside, outside, and there's a direct relationship between those.
Yeah, this also brings to a whole discussion on philosophy, because basically, well, this all is all in the realm also of philosophy and philosophical. Like me, I consider myself more than a physicist, like a natural philosopher, because if I don't have the philosophy or the behind, then for me it doesn't say that much. It's okay. This is just a mechanism, but there has to be some meaning like behind. And so this brings like many other topics on the table, like the sense of oneness. I always fall into this discussion when I talk with friends that have this belief of the law of one. And so I say, well, if there's one, then there's the opposite of one. So there's all forcefully, so we get into all this philosophical discussion at the end, which is also part of consciousness, because I at that level, I just like, I like or resonate with the fact that consciousness, it's constructing reference frames in order to observe itself because it is unable of knowing if it is inside or outside itself. Just as simple as that. So
may I comment? May I just ask
so I will leave it
there. First of all, I'm apologizing for my video not being on. Something strange happening. I'm hitting my start video, and it won't work. It suddenly went off. I don't know what happened in the middle of your talk. So I'm clicking on it, and I cannot do that. But I can mute myself, but I can't get my video back on.
We can hear you though. That's good.
So what is the opposite of one? You mentioned this. One is the opposite of one. I'd love to know. What's the opposite of one?
Are you asking me?
Well, yeah, yes.
Yeah, I mean, no, this is something this is something that I think, because when they ask me, when they tell me this oneness, I say, okay, so then this totality, this absolute of absolutes, it would become a closed system, you know, and if it's a closed system, then there's no evolution, it's stagnation. And because we have closed systems in physics, which is like basically the universe, we have these erroneous ideas of entropy and negentropy and all of that. But this is all because of the fact that we think of a universe and we think about isolated systems and closed systems, and we think of the universe as a isolated system or as a closed system. And saying a closed system is the same thing as saying this universal oneness, you know, because then if it's a closed system, then it comes into the same, it's got to have the same consequences that a closed system in physics has. So the way for me to open the system was basically asking this question, because it's just a question. Okay, so if everything is one, then where's the opposite of one? And you can give it many answers.
Yeah.
Because when I ask the question, people say, oh, the opposite of one is zero, or the opposite of one is the absence of one. So then you see that you can give so many answers to that question that it opens the system. It's no longer that, you know?
Yeah, I think it's one of the, yes, it's true. It's fascinating. It's one of those things, though, that mathematics almost proves itself to be the ultimate truth, because literally the opposite one would be, I would say, it's inverse, right? So that's 1/1, and it ends up being the same. And there may be something deeply spiritual in that, because that's the only number that gives us that, right? That's it. There's one. And somebody, Mish, I'll just answer this because if I may, because I've got to go to another Zoom. Mish Alderson says, it's all one. Alan Green says, Shakespeare said so. If everything is interconnected, time, space, how do scientists shield out electromagnetic fields when they're conducting their experiments? Whatever happened to QEM? Thanks and congrats on the new US president. Smiley face. Oh, well, I read that and I didn't realize. I can't answer that question. So thanks, everybody. I don't know how scientists shield out electromagnetic fields when they, gotta go. Sorry, I'd love to answer that, but I don't know. But I do know that Shakespeare said it's all one, and he definitely meant it.
Thanks for joining us today, Alan. We always appreciate it.
A beautiful coincidence, you know. I also have to leave everyone, so I'm just saying bye at this moment.
All right, let me try and catch you.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
You guys take good care.
There is another question for me, so let me answer it. It says, again, I can't.
Okay.
This question is for Alan. What do you think of Freddie Silver's work? And I don't know. Who is that? So that's it. Those were the questions for me. I don't know. Who's Freddie Silver?
Okay.
I'll look him up.
All right. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you, everybody. I look forward to seeing you all soon.
Yes, we look forward to it as well, Alan. Thanks for joining us today. Be well.
You too.
Adam, I know your time is a little tight. Do you have another one you want to jump in on while you're here?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. And did we hear from Jamie at all yet, though? Jamie, did you want to jump on something?
At the beginning.
I can stay for another like 15 minutes, probably 20. So
okay.
Yeah.
Jamie and William and I are here for a little while longer, so just wanted to maximize.
Did you have one, Jamie? If not, I can just roll with it. Oh, it looks like he's frozen. So maybe I will go ahead.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll just address a question by Jeff Colebrook that's been voted up a couple times. So he asks, Adam, can you tell us more about your work on neutrons? Yeah, so the work that I'm doing on weak force phenomena and neutrons is complicated and in-depth, and I'm happy to explain kind of at high level a little bit of the approach of the work and the nature of that work. I've had to set the paper down for a while because both with Crown Sterling, working with Robert, launching the new encryption and doing a token pre-sale, that's been a big pile of work. And then also in my own work, building and fundraising for Core Network, I've had my hands more than full. Plus our math team has been on other research. So yeah, so basically the work on that is focused around understanding, what it is that causes weak force decay in different kinds of atoms. When we look at specifically the neutron, why is it that anytime a neutron is free from basically an atomic bond of some kind, why is it that it decays into a proton in extremely short time? These are really, really critical questions, and they stack on the sort of inquiry that Nassim has had about the nature of the proton as being this fundamental structure to the universe, and that protons don't decay. Why is it that protons never decay, but neutrons do, and they decay into protons? And my investigation kind of led me down the road of, what are the W and Z bosons? Like, what are these force carriers which are released in exchange to allow this structure of what we call a neutron to become a proton? And the deeper I dove into research around the W, Z, and bosons, the more I found papers where the guys looking at it were like, well, it's interesting. There's a force release, but we actually don't ever see any kind of mechanism where these particles seem to actually exist. Like, they're decent as a theoretical model, but they don't have substance to them that we can identify or charge, mass, all of these things that we kind of require in order to really assign a deeper understanding to a particle. Charge, forgive me, there is charge, but basically there's some kind of charge ripple that occurs off of what we call a neutron at the moment that it then becomes a proton again. And I started looking at, the structure of the nucleus of an atom, and I started thinking about, okay, well, what if they're all protons, right? If they're all protons, then why don't they all hold and have their own positive charge? Because if they all had positive charge, like a proton does when it's floating by itself, spinning in space-time, then there would be as many electrons, around as there are, protons in the nucleus of the atom. And so this inquiry started getting me thinking about the actual spin and the torsion of each of these objects. And what I started to realize is that, well, if objects are spinning together in conjunction, for example, in the case where they're bonded at a polar level, so you could stick two balls on top of each other and they're both spinning the same direction, then if they're having some sort of torsion or influence on the surrounding space, if you have two balls close together spinning in the same direction and at the same rate, they're going to conserve some of that torsion and the force effect on the surrounding space. In other words, it's like if you spin something in water, it's going to have a certain amount of effect on the water. If you increase its size just a tiny bit, it's not necessarily going to increase the amount of effect on the water proportionally to that. And once you get, larger and larger stacks of things and you continue to build the scale of the object, yes, it's going to have more force on the water, but there's some conservation of spin and torsion effect on the spinning object and the fluid field around it, or in our case, space-time around it. And so when I started looking at conservation of spin, I started saying, okay, that makes sense. Then perhaps, why we call half of the protons, so to speak, in the nucleus of an atom neutrons is simply because they're conserving spin by spinning right along with the protons. And so they're having the same amount of positive charge influence on the surrounding space, and thus we have the same amount of electrons as we would have. Now, of course, you know, we have to account for ions and things like that. And in that nature, what happens is that in the geometric structure of the way that all of these protons are bonded together, you end up with a part of the nucleus of the atom kind of sticking out, or having like an independent additional pole, in that case, you know, adding an extra proton, and in that case, you know, creating a greater positive charge to the atom itself. And then vice versa, like you can also have more electrons, you know, caught in the torsion field around the nucleus of an atom than you have protons in the core, in which case you get a negative ion. And all of these things start to kind of fit into place and make sense as a result simply of spin and spin conservation. And as we know in unified physics, you know, when you get down to this most simple answer, it's usually the right one because it starts fitting all the pieces together. You know, I remember being at Foster Gamble's house many, many years ago, and he had a model on his shelf of balls that were interconnected. And, you know, you turn it and the balls would turn, and they're all turning because of tangency in connection with each other. And when we look at the proton, what we're dealing with is something that appears to be an extremely solid object from the standpoint of the fact that it's massively sustainable. It lasts longer than the lifetime of the universe. You know, it's like spinning at the speed of light. It's about as solid of an object as you can imagine in the universe, even if it's made of light, right? Because its amount of energy is massive. And if we look at the gravitational effects it would have if it wasn't spinning at the speed of light, because it's a mini black hole and its charge radius is its event horizon and all that juicy stuff, if you've been studying here in Resonance Science Project for a long time, then you start to see that yes, like in the nucleus of an atom, you're literally dealing with semi-solid like objects, solid like balls of energy that are tangent, you know, at the space of a single Planck length, the distance that the Yukawa potential, you know, the strong force, as we call it, you know, or as mainstream physics calls it, can hold them together. And the way that those balls can spin are polar bonds, or, you know, equal bonds at the equator where they're spinning opposite directions. But you can also get really interesting structures where you have a ball and you have another ball, and they're bonded actually at the point in sort of the upper and lower hemispheres. And this allows you to get these different angles and shapes. So a lot of my studies in the quantum geometry course are about the shapes of kind of the cores of these atoms, and then looking at how those match up to atomic structures that we know, and how looking at it from the spin torsion standpoint explains that. But the result basically that it comes down to is that what is a neutron really? Actually, it's just a proton. It's just a proton conserving spin in conjunction with other protons. And if it's freed, if a proton is in that state of conserving spin and it's freed from a proton, we're going to see a charge release and some kind of reset as that proton begins having its full positive charge influence on the surrounding space. So that's where we actually see that change happen, when it's now in relationship to space around it the same way, like as a proton on its own, rather than in the field where the torsion is being conserved inside of an atomic nucleus. So I hope that was helpful.
Adam, I missed something there. Could you repeat that?
Neutrons are just protons. Basically.
That was epic, man. That was epic. That was it was quite a trick to follow all the ways of looking at the one thing you were describing there. But it definitely was a powerful transmission of your understanding of just what is a neutron. So,
thanks, man.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thanks
that.
for following along.
Yeah.
And not spacing out.
Okay.
I am going to have to go after that one though, guys. And I love you guys so much. So.
Love you too, man. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks.
What were you going to say, Jamie?
Oh, I had a dropout of my power. My power did one of those flashing on and off, which then sends you into waiting for your internet to reset.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
All right. Well, talk to you later, Jamie and Marshall. Hope to speak to you sometime today or tomorrow. I'll text you.
Sounds good.
And William, great to see you guys. And everybody else who's tuned in and watching, you're awesome. You're amazing. Thank you for studying unified physics. Thank you. You're amazing. Aloha.
Yeah. Take good care, Adam. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, Jamie, you're back. That's great. Yes.
There was a question.
Do you see any questions you want to?
Yeah, well, Christiana asked about how we think that technology is going to evolve in the next year, and specifically also like social media and stuff like this. And in general, I think the way we're going right now is technology moving more towards being biomimicry and learning more from nature and taking those lessons and putting it into technology and then making all that stuff really small. So going nano, and then probably having that stuff fly. So drone technology, vertical takeoff vehicles being powered by electric batteries, I think is in the next couple of years. That's going to be a serious game changer when you've got individual crafts that you can get into that are, you know, automatically going to take you where you need to go on batteries. That's going to be super game changer. And then in terms of social media, I think we're seeing right now the fracturing of social media, where the big networks are going to probably still be around, but a lot of new, smaller, niche networks are going to come up where people go into their little micro worlds. And that could be good in some ways, and it can be not so good in other ways. In terms of unifying everything, it's kind of good to have everybody all in the same place. So when you hear the reflection of all different viewpoints, you get a better clarity to the whole. And so I hope to see the technology become more unifying, because right now it's like super polarizing. And I don't really know as much about the technology in the world of physics, but maybe that's a good jumping off point to ask William about the technologies that are in the building with you. Because I was speaking really generally about technologies, but William is in a building, for those who don't know, it's called Taurus Tech. And they're doing all kinds of stuff with technologies of various kinds, including art crystals and the resonator. But William, what do you think is going to happen in the world of biotech, you know, biophysics and astronomy, astrophysics, the technology of scientific instruments and things like that?
Yeah, I'm glad you also mentioned in the worlds of biotech, because kind of hand in hand with some of the technologies that are being developed here, that oftentimes I even like to call field technologies, technologies that interface with the unified field. One of the things about the unified field, if you were to look at me and Nassim's paper on the unified space memory network, we have a unified description of the field, not only acting to bring coherence to organized matter, but with that same mechanism involving sentience or awareness. So the actions of the unified field and organizing matter and bringing about coherence and interaction between particles and forces, it is part and parcel using an awareness, using sentience, consciousness. So I think a major advancement in the coming technologies in terms of biotech will be consciousness interface devices, as well as what is called artificial intelligence. Some have difficulties with that particular appellation, artificial intelligence. I use it to mean, basically intelligence or sentience that is being channeled, or you could even say generated in a technological system, not necessarily in a living system. The technologies that are being developed that are coupling with the unified field that can be used for over unity energy production, or modulating the geometry of space-time for propulsion mechanisms, could also be used to generate supercomputer level intelligence, sentience. So the kind of artificial intelligent devices, technologies that can be harnessed with that kind of technology would be of inestimable use, value. And in fact, this kind of what you could even think of as biotechnology, in the case of this AI, is kind of like biomimicry technology. I believe it's necessary for utilizing these systems that will have advanced propulsion, utilizing gravitational control, even over unity energy production. And it'll involve consciousness interface, direct consciousness interface.
I think over unity is coming, William.
Yes. Oh yeah, undoubtedly. So especially with this new paper coming out. Because it's a unified theoretical framework based on a fractalization of space-time defined by an entropic principle. An entropic principle related to the surface to volume holographic ratio of Nassim's quantum gravity solution. So when you're talking about this entropic principle, it's understanding the role of entropy in the organization of matter and the interaction or unification of interaction of forces, electromagnetism, gravity. Those electromagnetism and gravity are how we produce our energy, right? We'll use gravity to spin turbines in a dam, to use the electromotive force to generate electricity. Understanding the interaction and unification of these forces is really the first step to getting to that over unity energy production. And having a description of it in terms of entropy, in terms of entropic dynamics, not only gives you the information structure of this unified field, i.e. Sentience, consciousness, awareness, but also, what you're dealing with is this exchange of entropy. So, low entropy systems exchanging to entropy to make high entropy systems. And again, that is the production of energy, is that you take a low entropy system and you use it to drive work, creating a high entropy system. So having the mathematical framework, this unified theoretical framework that describes the exchange of this entropy across these systems, you can understand at a first principles level how low entropy systems are infinite in the universe. Because this unified framework is describing a fractalization of space-time across scales, from the Planck scale to the universal scale. So there's no shortage of low entropy systems. And having the mathematics to describe how they couple together, how they link together, I believe that is the key to developing an over unity energy device, because you can identify low entropy systems, vacuum modes, particular modes of the vacuum that you can arrange in a low entropy state and exchange that to extract work, extract energy to a high entropy state. And it's a really smart way to get energy and use energy, because there's an infinite number of these low entropy states. So you're not going to run out of energy. And it's a potentially very clean way to access near limitless energy. And that is the turning point in human civilization, when energy is no longer a scarce commodity, because things like traveling no longer have a huge cost associated with them. And when every single person has the freedom to travel off planet if they want, that's some pretty serious freedom. And it'll kind of necessitate a kind of rearrangement in the control systems, control structures here on Earth.
Yeah, that redefines what the meaning of an economy is. The actual definition of an economy, not just the structure or system of an economy, but what it actually is when the model goes from a scarcity debt-based system to a infinitely abundant, unending, open system like that. And the very nature of an economy changes. And that's exactly where we're heading.
Scarcity consciousness changes to abundance consciousness.
And it's no longer how can we, get more of this scarce resource. It's okay, we've got an abundance of this resource. I think the focus shifts to how can we do things better, smarter. It
does. A couple of comments I wanted to make in regards to the technical evolution aspect. I just recently read a book called The Spatial Web by Gabriel Rene and Dan Mapes, which is describing what we know of as the web now, shifting from sort of this text-based page with media on it, linking into a full ubiquitous presence within the space that we inhabit in our world and beyond, is where it's going with AR and VR and artificial intelligence and blockchain, crypto-based transactional systems. And in their model of the spatial web, decentralization and user sovereignty and user identity ownership and ownership of all that you contribute to it, that you can give permission for others to have access to, and you can revoke that permission. Right now, it's the other way around. We give it all to the big giants out there. They own it all. We just give it away, and they use all the data. And like you just said, how control system will shift and revert. And that's really, I think, an essential requirement. And I think the greater reality of this question that is inevitable in my mind, and think, well, inevitable is right now the field of artificial intelligence, AI, and then its relationship to augmented reality, AR, and virtual reality, VR, and the other things just described, is probably the most vastly funded innovation field in technology right now, which most of us don't really know about yet. But the magnitude of what is being put in place, which of course includes that human-machine interface, which we have right now. We're using a human-machine interface right now. It's advanced our civilization and our culture in very profound ways and makes this kind of connection possible, information sharing possible. And it's actually, you know, that's what's happening in the feedback loop of the cosmos anyway. Now, it is about to go, I think, inevitably to an entirely another level that is hard to actually comprehend. And that's why reading a book like The Spatial Web, for me, was very helpful to see, you know, where is this headed? And it's a profound shift. And I think that potentially, in order to become an off-planet species, in order to embrace the gravitational control over Unity devices, the ubiquitous ability to travel in our world and beyond our world, especially though beyond, to be able to navigate with craft in a vastly greater spatial coordinate system, and interact with, you know, communications, and ultimately, you know, sustenance of our beings, that there's probably a necessity for some kind of an interface with that technology. I'm one of the last people to be excited about such ideas as transhumanism. It doesn't turn me on, you know. I like nature a lot, and I like natural beingness, and I believe our consciousness is completely capable of all that already, and that's probably a step in the process. And yet I do have a sense that it's part of the evolutionary process that is inevitable in, first of all, I think it's inevitable in our world because it's so heavily funded. There's so much advanced research and application development that we're not even aware of yet. That's gonna just dwarf anything we even thought about coming very soon. And I think it's inevitable as we go out beyond our world that that's going to be the case. So, and it's not far off either, you know. So I think we're definitely at a threshold. One of the questions, I think it might be still the first one on here, in regards to the company in Zimbabwe now selling a power generator that runs perpetually on radio frequencies and produces no pollutants. So this is Maxwell Chikumbutso, who is from Zimbabwe. Whoever has watched Thrive 2 will have seen Maxwell and his technology featured in it. And Foster Gamble and the small vetting team he went there with to Zimbabwe were able to put his device to the test. And from their first level vetting of that technology, felt like it is actually functioning as, and I don't know technically if it's considered an over Unity device. I do know that it has within it a bank of 18 batteries. And after many hours of running a arc welder without any other power sources hooked up to this device, when they tested those batteries, they not only were chain charged, but they had actually increase their charge nominally. And therefore they felt like this was a true, successfully functioning free energy technology, free in the sense that it's accessing radio frequencies in a particular way that enables it to have continuous electrical power generation. And the device featured in Thrive 2, which is the size of like the small room that I'm in here right now, could power 300 homes. Now, I do know, having talked with Foster recently, that Maxwell, who the inventor, is launched his business called Safe Technologies, and that there are customers purchasing his units for personal, residential, as well as commercial uses. So it's underway. I do believe there are other over Unity devices that already exist in our world. So I really have a confidence that that is also inevitable and it's necessary. And it's, as William was saying, that will transform the nature of what we even consider as an economy, as how we actually see ourselves as beings in this world, and how we see the potential of what we can actually, because right now I think people are purposefully being made to be confused and to be imposed with this very limited scarcity-based, fear-mongered, like just keep everybody in a state of panic, basically, for all sorts of reasons, because then there's the potential for control. And that's not the true nature. There's another question I really like to hear. I don't see it, but the question was, what does Sri Lakshmi, which is the image behind me is a Hindu goddess named Lakshmi, the goddess of abundance and wealth, and what does that have to do with unified physics? And the beautiful thing is that, as Adam said, the very foundation of our physical reality, the very truly, like he said, or I don't know if Adam or you, William, said that, the proton is like the most solid particle that there is. And, the estimated half-life of a proton is 10 to the 36 years, and the estimated age of the universe is 10 to the 9. So it's just orders of magnitude beyond what we can conceive of is the estimated half-life of a proton, which means that the very foundation of the physical universe is eternal. And that's just abundance. That's all there is abundance at the very, very foundation of our physical universe. And when we understand that, when we actually take that in and understand that that is reality, not the scarcity, not all the other stuff, that's completely irrelevant when you understand that that is the foundational nature of things. That's what Lakshmi is. That's what Lakshmi represents, is that level of abundance. So, Jamie, you were saying something?
Once you know that the proton just doesn't decay, that it's an eternal thing and everything's made of protons, that's kind of like all you need to know. From there, yeah, over Unity devices make sense because the universe isn't slowing down. You don't have to keep adding fuel to stuff to make it spin. It's just spinning.
Right. Yeah, that was for me when I was writing my book Cosmometry, and I hadn't known that about the proton, and then somewhere along the way, this is just like, what? That's what's true? And you just go to like Wikipedia or whatever, and there it is. It just says it right there. There's just no esoteric concept. This is just the way it is in hardcore physics. And that just blew my mind. I was just like, wow, this changes everything. And it's true, it does change everything. And I really feel it's so critical in terms of the the evolution of our technology that we really, you know, there's both the vast potential of it, and then there's the ethics of it, and how we actually embrace that much power. Because we're talking about power to a degree that dwarfs everything else. And so how we create the future system of our relational reality through the web, through the internet, through these technologies and everything is a critical question. I also wanted to just acknowledge the man named Tim Berners-Lee. He's the man who invented the World Wide Web in 1998 or 2 or something like that. So Tim Berners-Lee, you know, there was the internet before that started in the 60s basically, and connected research institutions and shared text data and things like that. And then he figured out a way to make that where you could link everything, hyperlink, HTTP, hypertext transfer protocol, you know, so you could hyperlink pages together and then let everybody else come in and connect and have this universal way of connecting everything. That became the World Wide Web. And today, Tim Berners-Lee, the guy who invented the web, is not happy with the way it's gone because it's become centralized and controlled by the big Googles and Facebooks and Twitters and everybody in Amazon, and they take all that data, and it's not a feedback loop. It's basically it's a sucking it all into their silos and then controlling it. And he's not happy about that. So he's been developing an alternative foundational platform called Solid, which is a open source, decentralized ability then for every individual to have ownership of their intellectual property, themselves basically, and their participation in it. Honest and appropriate transactional systems. And he has a company called Inrupt that is working on actually the application development for that. And I really just want to have us all just encourage us all to really take in that is the foundation upon which the universe works. Decentralized, ubiquitously interconnected, informational exchanging, autonomous toroidal systems, fractally across all scales, you know, like it makes sense. That's how it works, you know, and that's what will make it work for us. That's how we will harmonize with the universe when we adopt that model. And then bring that into reality as the true nature of the universe and our place in it, in this world. And then we can obsolete this control system that is, you know, I think it's literally driving everybody insane. It's designed to do so because then everybody has conflict internally and externally. And that's just not who we are, you know. We know it's far more beautiful and harmonious and love and joy and peace filled in the universe than that. So that's what I know. That's what this unified physics is all about. That's what we're here. That's what the stand I know that we hold because we get it. That's how it works. So I just wanted to speak to those things and share.
Well said, Marshall.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, guys, let's see. Do you want to do a couple more questions?
Yeah, definitely.
I lost my questions when I lost my power. So, William, you can take one.
You know, I did want to comment on the power generator in Zimbabwe that Marshall was talking about.
Yeah, please, William.
Yeah, you know, so, you know, it's apparently utilizing radio frequencies to replenish the charge, the energy on these batteries. And I was just going to mention that, you know, at a theoretical level, this makes really good sense, you know, because radio wave transmission is actually a way to transmit energy. You know, and the first time that radio waves, actually the first time electromagnetic waves were discovered by Hertz, was in the transmission of an electrical charge from one system to another, transmission of energy. And so, to me, at least, it makes really clear sense that, the Earth is naturally generating all these radio frequencies. We even know them popularly as things like the Schumann resonances. And so there's a lot of energy out there as radio waves. Mm-hmm. So, it stands to reason that you could design a system that is picking up that natural energy transmission occurring in the atmosphere and just grab that energy and use it to recharge a battery. So, I don't know some of the specifics and details of that device. It's not much is divulged. Most of what I know from it is from Thrive 2. But, my estimation on it is that it's probably the real deal. And, I guess it just goes to show that there are so many different ways out there that we can be utilizing energy, natural, abundant energy systems that are there. So, it's a one example, I think, of many of ways that we're stepping into an era where there's energy abundance. And as you were saying, Marshall, that's going to be a transformative experience for human civilization.
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear that you conceptually feel like that's a valid technology, and that it does make sense. There's a lot of energy, able to be tapped into. Even just in radio frequencies. Yeah.
I'm actually kind of surprised if it's going to be the first one to do that, because there's lots of energy just in the atmosphere. The charge differential, you see it with lightning strikes. Temperature differentials, you see it with hurricanes. Well,
then there's the other one that's showcased in Thrive, or at least mentioned, because it's the one that the Coram brothers are. It's a basically recreation of the Tesla Wardenclyffe Tower, and using the Zenic wave, which is a energetic movement of energy around the planet as well.
Is that through the crust? That Zenic wave, is that through the crust or the atmosphere?
It's a surface wave, and I can't say I technically understand how it works. My understanding is that's what Tesla was working with, and so it's like a surface wave that can transfer electricity and communication information, and that this new technology, or recreation of Tesla's tower, which is in Texas, and there's a little bit of footage of it in the film, would be able to wirelessly transfer electricity and communication without any electromagnetic detriment. Which, of course, that's another big factor, is the detriment of electromagnetic frequencies, which can be also beneficial, as of course, William, the researcher of Hans G. and Dirk Meijer, have shown that there's a set of frequencies that are beneficial to biological systems, and those are the detrimental, that we could actually tune our frequencies of electromagnetism to be beneficial, which would be, of course, a very smart thing to do, hopefully soon. But this could be that these kind of technologies may even mitigate that problem as well, or eliminate it.
Did you have a question that you wanted to take, Jamie, or should I grab one?
Jamie can't see the questions because when he dropped off, they all disappeared.
I'm looking for an article that Nassim posted in our WhatsApp chat this morning. Did you see that, William? About a superconductor that doesn't lose any energy, exactly what Marshall was just saying. So you do that while I
room temperature. What's this room temperature superconductor?
I think so. It's
Yeah.
a new scientist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is. I haven't read that article yet. But.
You know, one of the things is that it's actually kind of a while back I was reading about a room temperature superconductor. And at first, you know, I was very excited because that is a game changer, you know, because, you know, so much of our technological civilization is based on the transmission of electrical current, not only as energy, but also as information. And so if you have a superconductor, you can do that with zero loss, 100% efficiency. And, you know, there are superconductors, but they have to be at ultra cold temperatures. So, you know, a room temperature superconductor, you know, you get magnetic levitation. So transportation all over would be revolutionized. And then, of course, you know, 100% efficiency on energy transmission, computation, you know, computation without overheating, too much heat production. But as I was reading it, the caveat for the room temperature superconductor is that it has to be under tremendous pressure. And so, you know, that is kind of not the ideal system, because just like keeping something at extremely low temperature, keeping something at extremely high pressure is kind of energy intensive and requires some pretty sophisticated setups to maintain something under that kind of high pressure.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a trade-off there.
Yeah.
Well, I put the article to that room temperature superconductor in the chat, Facebook and Zoom, if you guys want to check that out.
Nice.
William, do you want to jump on anything in the last few minutes we have?
Yeah, sure. So there's two questions. One is on magnetic field generation in the body. The other is on the RNA vaccines. I'm wondering which one I should choose between these two.
I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on the vaccine, because it's such a hot topic right now and one I have big questions around. So
okay, yeah. So the two of the COVID vaccines that have been approved for in the United States are what are known as mRNA vaccines, and this is a relatively new technology. And you know, at face value, it is safer than some of the older vaccine technology, some of the older ways of making vaccines. In fact, one of the first demonstrations of producing immunity in this way was via an attenuated virus. You know, the idea is that you take a wild type virus and you put it into a laboratory condition in a cell culture or a laboratory animal, and you pass it under these kind of controlled conditions of the laboratory, and you get an attenuated strain, a strain that becomes really selective to only infecting this particular lab animal, this particular cell culture. And you can even select for specific traits, like it only replicates optimally at a low temperature, you know, so that when you put it into like the high temperature of the body, it can't replicate very well, you know, so it's an attenuated virus. Now, these ways of making a vaccine are dangerous, in my opinion, because, for instance, one of the things that you're dealing with is if you're making an attenuated polio vaccine, you're taking that virus and passing it from one mouse to another. What you do that is you take the brains out of one mouse and inject it into another to infect it. And you keep doing this. And, one of the issues with that is that the mice have viruses of their own, so these are zoonotic viruses. And there's always a potential that you have a zoonotic transmission of a virus. So, a murine virus, a mouse virus that's hitching a ride along in these virally infected animals you're working with, maybe it ends up in the vaccine, and, if you're taking it from the brain, it's going to be something that's selective for the brain. So that when you inject it, maybe you have some trouble with the central nervous system. A person develops meningitis or some kind of severe reaction like that. Now, so the mRNA vaccines, seem to be a much safer way of doing this because you're not using, surely you're not using any kind of animal model because, it's as simple as just synthesizing together a nucleotide sequence that corresponds to one that is found in the virus. And of course, in this case, they select for a nucleotide sequence that corresponds to an antigenic epitope of the virus. So this is a site on the virus that your immune cells recognize as foreign and mount a immune response to. And of course, that immune response involves developing antibodies that are going to bind to that epitope to neutralize the virus. So, the idea then is so you can kind of synthetically make this RNA transcript that functions as a messenger RNA transcript so that when it goes into the human cells, our cells, it goes down to the ribosomes, the translational machinery. They think it's an mRNA transcript. They grab it, they transcribe it, and you just got a little piece of the virus, a little polypeptide sequence of the virus. That's seen as foreign. The cells take it up to the MHC complex and express it on the cell surface for your immune cells to receive it and make antibodies. There's been a lot of concern about this, and that, so you're introducing this foreign RNA into the body via this vaccine. So what's to stop this RNA from coming into our cells, finding a reverse transcriptase protein, being transcribed, reverse transcribed into DNA and inserting into our genomes? And that was a very particular concern among many, even molecular biologists. It turns out that that is probably next to impossible for that to occur. As I was kind of researching into this, because I had that concern, because I know that we constitutively express the reverse transcriptase enzyme. The majority of our genome are retroviral elements. You've got 3 billion nucleotides. 2 billion of those 3 billion are retroviral elements, especially in the form of retrotransposons and transposons. And they use reverse transcriptase to move around in the genome, as well as your telomeres have a reverse transcriptase element. So the idea was, well, what is to stop our constitutive reverse transcriptase from incorporating that RNA into the genome? As it turns out, though, the RNA transcript would have to gain entry into the nucleus of the cell where the genome's at. And it can't do that on its own. So, this is one of the reasons why when you get infected with RNA virus like COVID, it doesn't insert its genome into yours. It's not a retrovirus like some others. And the distinguishing characteristic between what makes COVID just an RNA virus and others that are retroviruses like the herpes simplex virus is that those retroviruses have a nuclear localization signal that takes their RNA genome and traffics it to the cell nucleus where it's imported in, which is no small feat because you've got this huge ribonucleoprotein complex that has to get into the cell nucleus. So the RNA vaccine doesn't have any of that. It's really, there's little to no chance that it will integrate into your DNA. My other kind of thinking along this line was even if it were to, I'm not sure what detriment that would cause. Your DNA already has 50% of it is already retroviral elements jumping around. And a lot of what they do is actually very beneficial. They kind of form some of the epigenetic machinery, regulating and modulating gene expression.
But William, they've never done a vaccination program of this type of vaccination, right, on this scale. Do you think there's any worry of somehow fundamentally altering the human genome going forward from doing this on this scale? Or you're just saying it's not going to happen on any scale because it's such a small snippet of such a small chain that it's not, what's the risks, do you think?
So there's little to no risk of having large-scale systemic change of the human genome through this. It's like a 1,200 kb, 1,000 base sequence. And so compared to the 3 billion nucleotides that are there, it's a drop in the ocean, so the effects would be kind of negligible.
It has a super specific effect on like the spike protein or something?
Well, so, it is a fragment of the spike protein of the COVID vaccine. And this is where you do get into some risk, some dangers that I don't think are really discussed that much. Because if you start talking about potential risk and dangers, all of a sudden you're an anti-vaxxer. But there are risks, there are dangers. And one of them is that spike protein could share epitopes with your proteins that are part of your body. And this is where you might get autoimmune reactions. Also, because this vaccine was not tested, there's a 2-month trial, which is, usually these things are vetted for like 2 years with pretty rigorous vetting to assess their safety profile. To me, there's still kind of an open question of whether or not you can have what's called antibody-dependent enhancement, where you're expressing that spike protein from the RNA vaccine, and your body sees it, says this is foreign material. The B cells go and they make antibodies specific to it, but the antibodies that they make are non-neutralizing antibodies. And what happens in this case scenario is that when the wild type virus does come into your body, these antibodies bind to it, but they don't neutralize it. They don't stop it. They facilitate its attachment to immune cells and entry into the immune cells. So these antibodies actually increase the virulence and infectivity of the virus. It's called antibody-dependent enhancement. And it's a significant risk factor with almost any kind of vaccine. During my doctoral work, we looked a lot at a particular vaccine for dengue, the dengue virus, that had this horrible antibody-dependent enhancement, where if you got what's called a monovalent vaccine, what normally would just be a really bad infection would turn fatal because of this antibody-dependent enhancement. And so, you know, for me, it's still kind of an open question. Is this going to be an issue? Because it certainly wasn't vetted, you know, in the trials.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my understanding of one of the open questions that, you know, is an important one to consider. And we might just say time will tell at this point as to whether that is a true risk or not.
Yeah.
But it's important to understand that that is present. Now, I just want to be clear as we discuss this here in our Resonance Academy that, you know, we are in no way representing any advice or ways of how you might consider for yourselves what you want to choose to do in regards to getting a vaccine or any other treatment in relationship to the challenges that we're all facing. It's obviously up to every one of us to learn about these things and to inquire and to be able to see all the different aspects of the inquiry around these kinds of questions, and hopefully be able to have access to all the inquiry, because there is some censoring of some of what I think is important to at least ask questions around. And so, you know, just make informed decisions and really consider what feels best to each one of us is what's most important here. And again, we're not able to make any advice in that regard.
Yeah, thank you, Marshall, for pointing that out. Yeah, I'm not trying to give advice on whether you should or shouldn't take any kind of therapy. Just kind of produce it, giving some information that I have on it, and you know, the best course of action is to kind of research it yourself and make your own determination on it.
Yeah, and we really appreciate your knowledge. You know so much about how all this stuff works. I learned a lot today, and I also learned about the fact that the altering of the genome in the cell nucleus is such a almost virtually insignificant risk factor. The probability is so low that that's new, and I didn't understand that, and it really helps me to hear your analysis of that. So thank you. So I think we'll leave it at that. Today we're at the 2-hour mark, a little bit past, and man, what a session! That was great. Some fantastic questions, and great to have the full faculty here almost today. William and Jamie, thanks as always for being here. Everybody on Zoom, our wonderful Resonance community, thank you so much for being here, for asking great questions, for supporting us. Everybody on Facebook as well, thank you so much. This will be, you know, you can share this video out, share it to many people. We always appreciate that. And we'll be back in a month in February, the 3rd Wednesday of every month. 12 p.m. Pacific time is our faculty Q&A, and the first Wednesday, 12 p.m. Pacific time, every month is Live with Nassim. So we get to ask him some good, juicy questions. And we got great new elective courses, as everybody knows. Check them all out, and be well, take good care, and let's create this beautiful new world that is vastly abundant and returns back to a state of harmony altogether. And I know that's what we're up to. All right, be well, everybody.